Today's the second Sunday of Lent. We continue our Lenten series, Attitude Adjustment. We all need an attitude adjustment when it comes to the topic we're talking about. I said last week that the less you think you need this adjustment, the more you probably do. And what we're talking about is humility. Humility is simply a virtue, which means a good habit. And I think it's the most important virtue there is because it underlines every other virtue that we try to live in our life. It's incredibly important, but often misunderstood. There's some people who think that humility is weakness or low self-esteem or lack of ambition or maybe just downplaying your accomplishments, a low or bad opinion of yourself. That's not humility. None of that stuff is virtuous. In fact, I'd say that stuff is mostly a mark of insecurity, something that we have to overcome in our life. Humility is not a low opinion of yourself. It's a clear opinion of yourself. I said last week, humility is really knowledge of yourself as you truly are. It's derived from a Latin word, humilitas, which quite literally means is related to the word ground, soil, earth. It gives us the concept of being grounded, of being rooted. People who are truly humble are grounded in reality. So today I want to look at how we can begin to truly cultivate humility. And I'm going to talk about something that, in complete honesty, I'm not so good at. I'm working on this myself. And to do so, we'll look at today's gospel reading. We always hear this scene from different gospels on the second Sunday of Lent, that we just heard. And it begins like this from Luke's gospel. Jesus took Peter, John, and James and went up the mountain to pray. So we know there are 12 apostles that Jesus chose, but 3 of them were especially close to Jesus. They formed a kind of inner circle. They shared certain unique experiences with him. And here, he takes them on a kind of retreat. They go up a mountain to pray. In the Bible, mountains are very important because they're special places of prayer and encounter with God, reminding people of the greatness of God. Maybe just driving through the Pocono Mountains, or maybe if you had the chance to hike up Mount Tammany or Mount Mincy or some of the other places around here. How can you not believe in God when on a beautiful day you just see all of his creation? And so that's the idea of the mountains. This verse here gives us 2 basic lessons about prayer. First, we need a specific time for prayer. If you read the Gospels, Jesus was always intentional about setting aside prayer time, and he's the Son of God. He made it a priority throughout his life. It's the same for us. Unless we set a specific time, make prayer a priority, make it important in our day, it probably won't happen. And I know that from my own experience. And second lesson that we can gain here about prayer is that we have to have a specific place where we can get away from all those distractions and noise around us. It doesn't have to be a mountain. It could be a chair in your bedroom. But to make that place your prayer space is very important. Now, Luke then continues this story. While he was praying, his face changed in appearance and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were conversing with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his exodus. His exodus will be his crucifixion. So this incident we call the Transfiguration. While Jesus is praying, his glory is revealed. We know that Jesus is 100% human, but he's also 100% God. Throughout the course of his life, his glory was pretty much hidden from sight. But here, just for a moment, his glory bursts forth as the Son of God. His divine nature is revealed. And this is given as a gift to Peter, James, and John, and to us. So they would be strengthened in their own discipleship for what is coming. Years later, Peter would talk about this event as the most transformative event of his life. And that's why he says in one of his letters that we find in the Bible this. He says, "We did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power and coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, but we had been eyewitnesses of his majesty." So Peter believes in Jesus' majesty, his glory. He understands it not because he heard about it, not because somebody told him about it, but because he witnessed it personally. He's seen it with his own eyes. So then back to our story. Luke continues. Peter and his companions have been overcome by sleep, but becoming fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. If you've ever had trouble, honestly, staying focused during prayer or even falling asleep, I've done that, you're in good company, because Peter is twice recorded as falling asleep in the presence of Jesus in the Gospels. Here, he wakes up and he sees Jesus shining in glory. He sees Moses and Elijah along with him. They're two towering, important figures in the Old Testament. And understandably, Peter is just overwhelmed in this moment. And he says kind of incoherently then, he says, "It's good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But he did not know what he was saying. Well, this is an amazing, overwhelming experience, and like any amazing experience, Peter doesn't want it to end. But even as he's speaking, this whole episode becomes even more amazing and even terrifying. Luke says, "A cloud came and cast a shadow over them, and they became frightened when they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, 'This is my chosen son. Listen to him.'" So just as they're overwhelmed and terrified by this cloud coming down upon them, God's voice from heaven brings calm. It's a glorious, majestic scene, but a very, very simple message. "This is my chosen son. Listen to him." Listen to him because his teaching fulfills everything that preceded him, from Moses to Elijah. And to listen to him requires, first of all, that we got to listen. And that's not always easy to do, is it? Just think about listening to another person. It means to hear, but to hear with attention. There's a difference between merely hearing and listening. To listen means to give our full, undivided attention to somebody else, perhaps even to heed them or obey them. It carries the connotation of a relationship with a person. Unfortunately, let's be honest, sometimes we don't like to listen. Sometimes we're afraid to, maybe. If I listen, I might have to change my mind, and I've already made up my mind. I don't want to change my mind. If I listen, I might have to admit I was wrong, and I'm never wrong. If I listen, I might have to admit I know something. I've been pretending that I know, but I don't really know. When we fail to listen, we fail to learn. And that can stunt us in the process. We can fail to progress as we could or should in maybe emotional growth, or in our knowledge and intellectual growth, or certainly in our spiritual growth. Think how frustrating it is when you're talking to somebody and they're not listening to you, and they only insist on their side of the story and won't keep their mouth shut. They just keep going on and on. Think how unattractive people can be when they're like that. But on the other hand, think how beautiful and easy it is to reconcile with a friend, or to have a transaction in business, or get work done at school or wherever, when we simply listen. Think how really loving the act of listening really is. And to listen, it takes humility. I'd just like to tell a little story about one way I have learned humility in my life. When I was a seminarian, I decided to, at a certain point, take a year off and work as an intern in a parish. It was one of the best decisions I ever made because I wasn't really sure at the time of my vocation, my calling to the priesthood. And I finished that year working in a parish as ready as ever and as committed as ever to be ordained a priest. And at the time, my expectation was I had 2 more years of seminary study. And the bishop at the time sent all of the seminarians, the guys studying for the priesthood in our diocese, to a different seminary. It was St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia. And so I arrived there in the fall semester expecting to have just 2 more years of study. And the faculty there tells me, well, you didn't take all the right credits in the previous place, and we can't transfer some of your credits. And so we're going to have to put you back a year. And I just looked at him, what? I got A's in all my classes. Are you kidding me? I spent that entire semester in rage and anger, getting up early in the morning, sitting in the chapel and saying, God, why are you doing this to me? And then my mother heard of this, and for her it was really personal too. She said, I want to slap the bishop. She didn't slap the bishop. God rest her soul. But it just happened that the seminary had a certain motto, and I keep this t-shirt as a memento. They had an intramural flag football game between the older guys and the younger guys every year in November, in the middle of the fall. And the seminary motto is humilitas, humility. And so I have this old raggedy t-shirt that's reminding me that I learned the greatest lesson that year, to cultivate humility. It was the greatest lesson I could learn, even though my ordination to the priesthood was delayed. And so, my friends, listening means humbling ourselves, at least a little bit, to recognize we don't always have all the answers. It takes humility to put aside our self-importance, our self-absorption, our self-interest, to slow down, to perhaps listen to what somebody has to say. And a great place to learn humility is prayer. Because prayer is not just talking to God, it's a conversation. It involves listening as well. Think about when you talk to someone and you want advice. Usually, the wiser, the more knowledgeable, the more experienced person does the talking, and the other person does the listening. And if you are talking to someone, you're not sure who is who, it's always the best choice to listen. And so when it comes, my friends, to Jesus Christ, we have the font of all wisdom. We have the source of all knowledge. We have him through whom all things were made. So it just makes sense that we listen to him. And how do we do that? Well, as I said, pick a time and a place where you're going to pray. For many of you, this is something you're already doing. Perhaps some of you, you're looking to re-up or to start a new year prayer life. As I said, the most important step is to pick that specific time and place where it's going to happen. And then decide, it doesn't matter how long, 5 minutes to start. Decide in the course of renewing your prayer life to spend at least part of that time listening. And how do we do that? The easiest way to listen to Jesus that I know of is to start reading the Gospels. And again, many of you have done this. You could probably share how this was powerful in your own prayer life. Pick one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and for the season of Lent, for the rest of this season, just read the entire Gospel. If you do about half a chapter a day, you'll easily finish that Gospel before Easter. That could change and just bring your prayer life to a whole new level. And along with that exercise, try this one just this week to practice listening. Ask yourself, who do I need to be listening to this week? Is there someone at home, at work, or school who's frustrated with you because you're not listening to them? Maybe you could start to change that this week. Well, bottom line, I love this quote by St. Augustine. He once said, "There's something in humility which strangely exalts the human heart, and it begins simply by listening." Amen.